And we are live, VC Wisdom Pod with Gabriel Jarrosson, in English, Gabriel Jarrosson. He is live from France. He's a VC at Lobster Capital, managing partner to be precise. This pod has been brought to you by podfire.com, which is my podcasting company. If you want to start or scale podcasts, get insights, leads, friends, subscribers, amazing guests like Gab, and clients even, you can go to podfire.com and let me know. Gab, I'm really glad to have you on the pod. You have a very interesting profile. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and Lobster Capital?
Sure. Charles, or Charles, I should say. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here as well. I'm an investor, a VC. Started Lobster Capital. The background on kind of how I got here is I'm an entrepreneur. And I've been for many, many years. I actually still consider myself an entrepreneur today and not really just an investor or just a money guy. I've built many, many startups, 7 to be, usually I say 7, I've actually built more, but let's say serious ones, 7. I've sold 3 and I failed many more, all the rest. And, there's a lot of learning in failing. And I really kind of saw that not every startup is different. And it made me want to start investing because I realized, well, if not every startup is, has the same potential, then you can find the ones that have the most potential and invest in them. So I started with an angel group, or as we say, an angel syndicate with French investors. It grew quite a lot to becoming the largest one in France, 700 individuals who invested with me. And, having my own fund was the next step. So here I am today with Lobster Capital.
And typical Frenchman, you started in wines, Le Vin de France. Tell us a bit more about that one.
Sure, absolutely. That was one of my my first love, or one of my first businesses. Actually, I started this when I was still studying, and selling wine online. So we go back to 2011, 2012 when I started thinking about this. And at this time, there's no drop shipping, but everyone talks about Amazon. Amazon is, the guy who lost money for so many years, and now he's making a lot of money finally after 10 years. And I was thinking to myself, Amazon is pretty smart. They sell things that they don't own. They have basically third-party sellers on the website. It's called the marketplace. And being French, of course, I loved wine and talked about wine. I went abroad, and the summer I wanted to start my first business. I was in Hong Kong, and everyone told me, "Oh, you want to be an entrepreneur? You're French. You should import French wine to Hong Kong." Which is, I came back to France. I was like, okay, I'm going to import French wine to Hong Kong. I realized, importing wine was kind of complicated. First of all, importing and exporting is tough. Alcohol is on a whole other level. So I thought to myself, let me start with a website, and I can do like Amazon. I can be a marketplace. So levindefrance.com was a French wine marketplace only for France, because it's so much easier to keep the alcohol in the country. And it grew quite big. I learned SEO mostly out of this first kind of adventure. And after 4 or 5 years, I sold it to my competitor. The competitor is still alive today. It still goes on with some of the wine producers that I've worked with at the time.
I was in Hong Kong to change my life as a student. I also started various businesses. I remember hustling 16 hours a day in my 2 by 2 meters dorm in Hong Kong and drinking like 10 green teas per day. Hong Kong, I mean, such a special place, but importing is so complex. I mean, I've also done drop shipping before it was cool. That was one of my businesses, but importing wines with the certifications, the importing fees, that must have been hard. You decided to start pretty hard there for yourself.
Well, that's the thing. I thought I was going to do importing, and I quickly realized, like you said, it was not impossible, but for like a 21-year-old on his own, yes, it was impossible. So, I thought to myself, I'm going to do the website first, and then in 2-3 years, I'm going to do importing, which I never got to. It was only the website. I only sold in France. And, there's already a lot of money to be made just selling wine in France. So,
Right. And the bottles, they're so heavy, so when you want to ship them, but what do you have to say
it's expensive about, and fragile.
Yeah. And fragile. What do you there's a péremption date, or it expires basically, and it doesn't need to touch the sun and so forth and yada, yada. What do you have to say about Gary V with Wine Library? He did pretty well, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's, super interesting because Gary Vee was my example for so long during this time. Everyone told me, oh, you should be the French Gary Vee. You should have your own YouTube channel. And it's super fun because I ended up having my YouTube channel. I do have my YouTube channel today on startup investing. Much later in my life, I came to the YouTube game. I think a few things from Gary. First of all, he's a very, very talented guy. Second of all, he has such a huge personality. And this is also what helped him kind of succeed because his YouTube channel really reflects his personality. But social media in general and YouTube in particular, I think are amazing, amazing tools. We're on YouTube right now. I'm on YouTube as well. And I think YouTube gives you superpowers. And, so many people on YouTube end up building massive businesses just from their YouTube audience. People connect with you because it's a longer format. They like you, they trust you. For investing, it's important to get people to trust you. And that's how I was able to get 700 French people that I don't know to invest with me, was mostly from YouTube.
Wow, man, that's impressive. Yeah, lots of energy around YouTube, lots of energy around creators nowadays. Just yesterday, I was watching My First Million. I'm not sure if you listened to that podcast, but with two creators, and yeah, they were very impressive. I think they made like 240K a month from all these Spotify downloads. And yeah, it's a guy making rap basically, and his wife manages him. It's really interesting. Really recommend that one. You then shifted after the wines to online e-learning platform. Tell us about that shift, because I'm also all about learning. You probably got hooked too. You've got a nice exit under that one. You also exited from Le Vin de France, by the way. Tell us about that new one.
So, I mean, there's a bunch of other kind of smaller startups in between that, don't appear on my resume. Them. But a lot of things. I started a dating website at this time. I started a t-shirt e-commerce store. I started supplements for hair growth, if you can believe it. Apparently it doesn't work, but no, it was working, not on me. I started so many things, but yeah, at some point I pivoted to e-learning because I had kind of an opportunity. I met a co-founder and he had access to amazing experts, and they're not kind of digitalized. Everything was in a physical kind of live conference. And we thought about kind of putting all of this knowledge online, French experts. And that was, so, there's so many learnings in all of my experiences, but basically with wine, I learned what you said. It's expensive to ship because it's heavy, it's fragile. And so then you're like, oh, I'm going to sell videos of conferences. And you're like, that's amazing. I can ship them for free. It's digital, it's online. And then there's the margin, it's something that is really, really often overlooked. People don't look at margins and don't even know what it is. They just look at revenue. But if you sell a bottle of wine or a bunch of bottles for 1,000 euros, and I'm only making maybe 5% of that, 50 euros, which is, it's tough to get people to spend 1,000 euros, but you only make 50, which is nothing. On the other hand, if you sell a conference online, my agreement was I would share revenue with the speaker 20%, and I make 80% of the revenue. So it's 1,000 euros. There's 800 euros for me in my pocket. So that's, every time I started a new business, I really tried to. And apparently I hear a lot that it's the same about real estate. When you move to a new house, what you were missing in your previous house, you're going to look for in your next house. So, if you have a house that doesn't have a lot of light, and your next house, you're going to be like, oh, I want something that has a lot of light. Or, if you had stairs and you hate them and you want a flat house, whatever. And so I think it's the same here. Every time I try to get something that I didn't have before. And so this was kind of a natural move for me. What I realized, kind of the other side of that same coin, is that wine, everybody buys wine, drinks wine. The producer is already kind of famous, so people are looking for that specific bottle. If you're creating content from scratch, you got to go and find people to buy it who are not looking for it. So it's a very different things. People that are already looking for a solution and they can just Google it, and you can, like I said, I did SEO and you show up. And people that they don't even know that they need your solution, which is, another problem in business. So anyway, every time I was learning, trying to do something else, and yeah, I ended up selling that one too after quite some years.
Yeah, educating people that don't know that they have a need costs so much more though, than finding someone that have a direct need. It's funny because I also started a t-shirt one. I never even sold one t-shirt for that one. My supplement business was basically your wine business, in the sense that, I mean, it was, we scaled it, but we realized also that shit was hard, you know. We invested like probably 100K just to prove its efficiency in a lab was a nootropic, approved by Health Canada and so forth. And we realized that, yeah, the physical business was probably not for us, just for the shipping, the approvals, the yada. So we decided to exit that one. I want to ask though, I'm quite curious. You know, I've seen your next business after that one. You always have a pattern of being acquired. So what's your formula for that? Like, do you build with acquisition in mind? When do you know that you're ready for acquisition? How do you find an acquirer? Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because it's true. I try to, you know, so, okay. The idea is I'm someone who has a lot of ideas. I'm someone who's extremely curious. I look at a lot of things. I read a lot, books and online, and I look at so many, you know, businesses, and it's my job to know what's going on in terms of business. So I've always, I've spent a lot of time creating a lot of new businesses. Every year I will have a new idea and start something new. It's a habit that I think has been mostly bad for me, because I think in order to succeed, you need to do one thing and do it right. Sometimes I can't help it. It's, you know, too, like I must try something new. And I think it's not a good thing. I really do think you have to do very few things and do them well. And so, you know, I had this kind of pattern to try something new. And if it works, stay with it. But if it doesn't, you kind of abandon it. And most of my startups, I've abandoned them. But, you know, at some point I figured, well, you know, I've created this. I don't want to pursue it anymore, but it has value. It has revenue. It has maybe some, you know, like, for example, the e-learning has all of that content that in itself has value. And so I thought to myself, you know, it would be a shame to put it, just kind of put it to bed and shut it down. And I tried to, so that was to ask you, when are you ready for an acquisition? That was like, you know, I don't want to spend that much time on it anymore, but it exists. It sort of works. You know, it's not making millions. Most of them were not making millions, but it's making money. And, you know, why would I put it to zero and not do anything? And so there's so many people who want to be entrepreneurs, but they don't know what to start. They don't know how to start, but they're better at kind of taking something existing and growing it. And so, you know, the first exit that I had was my wine business. It was really opportunistic. I went to my competitor and I said, you know, he had at the time, I think 25 sellers on his website. So 25 different producers of wine selling. And I had 150. And I said to him, you know, you want to grow your base? I have the 150. And I told him point blank, like, I'm willing to sell. I want to sell. So that's the thing as well. You got to decide. I said to myself, I was kind of fed up with that business. I wanted to change. It was, like I said, a very small margin business. So I wanted something new. But once again, it was growing. It was working. So I didn't want to put it to zero. So I said, I'm selling. And he said, yes. You know, I think probably another thing to be able to sell is not to be fixed on a price. Every time I sold, I made every time some money, but I didn't have a price in mind going in. Because, you know, if you say, okay, I want, you know, 1.5 million or nothing, it's really, really hard to get that person to that number. But if you say, you know, I'm selling, make me an offer. And, you know, you can negotiate, by the way, you can say, no, come on, this offer is too small, but make me an offer. And, you know, that was also something that helped. Because once again, for me, I knew that if I didn't sell, I didn't say that to the seller, to the buyer, but I knew that if I didn't sell, I would probably make the business, like, stop the business and make it go to zero. So, you know, it's better than nothing. And yeah, now I really kind of force myself, now that I'm managing my own fund, not to create something else. And that's also why I've had 2 acquisitions in the last few months, in the last year, because there were kind of old businesses that I was spending, you know, a few hours per year to manage on the weekend. For the weekly newsletter, I was spending, you know, maybe half an hour every week, but it was every week. And I just wanted to kind of free my mind of this and move on. But it was still working, which is why I was still spending a little time. And so that's why I wanted to sell them.
Yeah. And that one, 30 minutes a week, like, how did people pay for that? You know, because I have my newsletter, I invest probably an hour per week. And I'm kind of like, I have 1 paid subscriber so far. I haven't put much effort into it. But like, how can I get people to pay for that? Like, was it like very high quality? Were you working with a bunch of bots that would kind of tell you like all the top news in X niche? How did that one work?
No, I mean, the thing is, people paid for the private content. It's not like a regular newsletter where I just send, oh, here's what's going on in venture, or here's what's going on in what and what topic. People were paying for the information. And if you didn't pay, you didn't have access to the information. So every week I would recommend a stock that I was buying. There's many newsletters doing this. But if you wanted to know which stock I was buying and why, you had to pay. So people were just paying to get access to the information. I did this for almost 5 years, every week, because I took a very strong interest into the stock market, and especially tech stocks, because I think it's kind of the next phase. I'm investing in startups, that's my job, but startups end up on the stock market at some point. Some stocks are what I call big startups, like Uber, Airbnb, Zoom, etc. And I think they're super interesting investments for most of them. And so because I was buying them, that's also the thing for me. Every time I do something, I decided to kind of build my own stock market portfolio. And I was like, okay, I can make a business out of it. I decided to make a paid newsletter. Again, a bad habit that I've stopped now, of creating always something new.
But do you think it's really a bad habit if you're like operating in an ecosystem in which one thing helps the other? Because like me, for example, my goal is to build an empire at Amazon size. It's not to necessarily invest and have exits here and there. It's really to build a gigantic tech company. And I feel that if I build this ecosystem and that constantly provides cash flow, it's not like big exits, or I may sell some business I don't like, that I don't feel that can have an ROI for the ecosystem. Do you feel that if this energy is kind of, okay, I invested here, but then it comes back through this startup, and then the startup helps the other, like, what do you think about the ecosystem theory of everything?
I think you're both right and wrong at the same time. I think, Amazon started for 15 years. Amazon was just e-commerce and nothing else. Look at when AWS was started. It was already 10 years in or something. And Amazon was already doing billions and billions and billions in revenue. And if at the very first year, Jeff Bezos would have said, oh, we're also going to do, compete with Netflix and do Amazon Prime Video and do servers, he would have done nothing. So I think when you're $1 billion company and you can hire a team of 150 people to launch a new service for you, then yes, you can have an ecosystem. But I think, probably before, I would say, I don't know, at least 100 million in revenues. That's what I see in the startups that I invest in. You should do one thing. I have a startup now that I've invested in August 2021. So just exactly 2 years ago. We're in August right now. And they're just starting, and now they're going to be at 100 million revenue before the end of the year. They're at 60 million right now. They're going to be 100 million before the end of the year. You got to be laser focused. And most of the startups, you can reach 100 million in revenue with one product, with one thing. Otherwise, it's a bad startup. You're not tackling a big enough problem. But most startups can. So that's why I think you're kind of right and wrong at the same time. You're right in the very long term, but in the short term, I disagree. I think you should focus on one thing.
So maybe I'm in my testing phase in which I'm trying to see where the PMF is. And once I see that one of my startups, quote unquote, will go into hyper growth, it'll be just an obvious decision to leave the other distractions.
Yes, but also hyper growth doesn't just happen. Once again, I see this every day with my startups. You're kind of thinking, like fishing. I'm going to put 10 lines and see which line has a fish biting. I think personally, and so by the way, I didn't mention, but I'm mostly investing in Y Combinator startups. That's kind of my specialty. And Y Combinator is really, really good in helping startups reach hyper growth. And hyper growth doesn't just happen. It's about experimenting. It's about pivoting. It's about trying new things all the time. And you have a much higher chances of reaching that if you're doing it with one startup and being hyper focused. So I do think you're not getting kind of the best chances of hyper growth. That being said, sometimes it does fall on you and happen, which is but there's more luck involved. And the idea of YC is to kind of manufacture it independently of luck. And for that, you got to focus on one thing, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. The experimenting part, I've got it. I have a product market fit agency, and I'm quite good at testing and experimenting and so forth. I think one potential insights that I got from them, not sure if you agree with that, but what you're potentially saying is that you may get traction, you may get like practice in this market, but the hyper growth is still a theory at some point in your brain, and you don't have data to prove it. And that is probably the difference as per where you should invest your time and energy. Am I right in saying that, like you have this idea, you implement it, the data says that, yes, there's a fit, but there's no like physical proof in this world yet that this will go into hyper growth, maybe because of future trends, maybe because of stuff that from your past entrepreneurial life. Do you get what I mean here?
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. Like I said, future growth doesn't happen, randomly or by mistake. It's a mix of a lot of things. It's a mix of, like you said, your previous experiences, of the experiments that you make. And I think there's always a little bit of luck involved as well. In every success, there's a little bit of luck involved all the time. But yeah, there's mostly the energy you put behind it. And so that's why I said what I said, that you have to focus on one thing.
Yeah. And great thesis, I guess, and just knowing stuff, which makes you a person in the right position. You're making bets. You need to be good at making bets, basically, to potentially go that way. Jeff B was quite good at that, right? He saw the internet grow by like 2,000%.
Yeah, this is the first sentence of my second book. So my second book just got out, and the very first sentence is a quote by Jeff Bezos, and the quote says, if you go and pitch at baseball and you swing with all your force, you might miss a few pitches, but the one you're gonna hit is gonna be a home run. But he says the difference is, in baseball you can only score 3 points at a time maximum, but in business, when you score a home run, you can score 10,000, 10 million, 1 billion points.
Right.
And so that's why you got it. Like you said, take bets, swing for the fences, and you're going to miss a few. And that's the story of my life. That's why all of those businesses I sold, because they didn't succeed as much as I wanted. And the ones that I kept are the ones that really, really, worked out. And the winners pay for the experiments. That's the end of the quote of Jeff Bezos. The winners pay for the experiments.
And we're going to talk about that on round 2, if you don't mind. Today was fun. It was a nice intro. Thanks a lot. I'm really glad I had you on. Pod was brought to you by podbuyer.com if you want to start your scale pod. We had Gab on today, Gabriel Jarrosson. Gab, where can people find out more about you?
The easiest way is LinkedIn. If you speak French, you can find my YouTube channel. It's called Leonis Investment. But LinkedIn is easy. You can add me or follow me.